Okay, well, first things first, you just look at me when we talk. I would love for you to tell me your name and your title here at Wichita State, if you don't mind.
Okay, my name is Pierre Moore Janssen, and I'm a professor here at Wichita State University, Department of Anthropology.
And, I'm talking to you today about, we're talking about the forensic science in regard to missing people or people found in some of the cases that I've been looking into. And you've worked in this field for some time, made a pretty big name for yourself. When I talk to people in this area, they're like, go to him, go to him, go to him. Give me a little background of how you got started into.
It started out in an elevator in Indianapolis, and I met a very distinguished colleague, Bill Bass, and he lured me to Tennessee. I was just finishing my master's degree at Arkansas, and I went to Tennessee and got my PhD there. Worked with him and my other professor, Dick Jantz, who's, by the way, they're both from Kansas. Worked here in Kansas before. I worked with them, finished my degree at Tennessee, and then, luck would have it, I got a job here at Wichita State.
When
And
did you start here at the school?
89.
89.
So I've been here 30 years, yeah.
I'm going to adjust one thing here real fast. I'm just going to flip one part of this just a little out more. It's okay. So 30 years, that's incredible.
30 years, yeah, I don't know that I ever believed I would have made that, but yeah, I've been working here for the state, the city, the county, and the surrounding states, and nationally, and even internationally during all those years.
So when you are assisting with things outside the university, I mean, like, how does that work? Like, police department, for example, will contact you and say, hey, I need your help?
They will contact me and they will request my assistance. Sometimes it's a sheriff's office somewhere, sometimes it's a police department, sometimes it's a prosecutor. I very rarely, I think once in my life, have I worked for a defense attorney. I don't make it a habit just because I want to make sure there's no potential conflict that I work for one or for the other. And I work as a state employee, being me being an employee of the university, so I lend my services to the different agencies who can use my help.
During your time working on cases, and for example, I'm talking about missing people here in my series, people who, I guess, kind of like reverse missing people who are found, but they want to know more about the person. They don't have any idea of who they are. What do you do in regard to going and finding out who they are?
Well, my objective is to initially identify just a general skeletal profile. Okay. Skeletal profile does not mean that's who they are. It simply means that that's what the skeleton looks like. And everybody has a profile. Everybody has a skeletal profile. But there's so much overlap between and among people in terms of what they look like, and there is between and among their profiles as well. So what I do initially is trying to establish what or who are they more likely to be.
Okay.
And so the greater likelihood means it's nowhere near a guess. It's far more than a guess, but it's an educated assessment based on size and shape. And so that's where I start. You don't start looking at somebody's clothing, you don't look at somebody's wallet. That is something that the police or the coroner does, or whatever. What I do is I look at the skeletal remains and I see where do they fall in terms of the general human distribution of variation, big or small, different kinds of shapes of variation. Then, once I do this, I do it by observation. I also measure bones, and I put, two and two together, and hopefully they make four or close to four. And so my assessment is based on years of experience, years of data collection. So it's a very scientific foundation, but it's also very much based in an overall experience. It's like you going in and you're doing a job. If you have no experience, then you may be able to look up in tables what it should be and so on and so forth.
Sure.
It doesn't work. Tables are good, but only if you know how to use them, right? And so that's how I proceed. Sometimes it takes minutes, sometimes it takes days, sometimes it takes months. It doesn't take months to get a general profile. It can take months, however, to reestablish a person or reconstruct a person. Sure. Years ago, we had something, there was a case that was called Club Mexico. And it literally took me 5 months to identify the 3 people who were involved in this case. But it took me no more than 30 seconds to identify there were a minimum of 3 people involved. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of the level at which you're approaching the case. And sometimes, depending on the circumstances, you have to move in very different directions. Okay.
What is the most challenging part of going in and moving forward with, you get a call out, you head to a scene, or I don't even know how it's presented to you. I assume that you get called out to a scene, but I don't know. Is there any major difficulty with going and assessing things? I mean, I know you say it could take just moments, or it can take a long time.
Right. I mean, a case is never done in moments. But as far as what I come to know very quickly about a case, doesn't have to take very much time at all. And the vast majority of cases take between a week or maybe 2 weeks at the very most. Sometimes we have several cases on top of each other, and that adds to the burden a little bit. But sometimes I get called out to cases. That's not a problem. I regularly bring a graduate student or 2 with me. And it's very good because that means the police, the detectives, they get to know who we are and how we operate. And sometimes police find things or it's brought to them, or the medical examiners receive things. The police bring things to them, others bring them by, and so they contact me and they bring things by my lab. And so we examine them. And then the examination, I really like the people here in Wichita. They're great people to work with, as are the people in the sheriff's counties, offices around here. But I will go there and I will assess the material. Assess simply mean I do my evaluations like I just described to you. Sure. And I get an opportunity to tell them what it is and why it is and how I can tell this. And it makes a huge difference. They, of course, have a vested interest in knowing about this, but they are prepared so that by doing this, so that when I write my report to them, they can go over the report and they can understand what it is I'm saying and why I'm saying so. They can see for themselves what it is I'm pointing out. And many times some of the remains will come back here, and I will do a more thorough examination of the material. Other times we do the examination at the coroner's office, and we do an equally thorough examination, but it may require less amount of time. So it's not like we ever do anything less. It's just a matter of where is it more efficient to do it.
When you're typically called to help, what are things that an agency might ask? They want to find out more about the person, but are you tapped into to find out, I don't know if the coroner's office or whomever is able to tell how a person died and all that stuff. Do you find out all those details? What kind of details do you
there is sort of a standard set of questions that a coroner has. Okay. Or medical examiner has, or whoever it is who's the investigator. I don't know if you remember Captain Landwehr, who yes. I started working with him when I first came here, and so we did so many cases together. But they want to know the age of the person, the sex of the person. They would like to know what they refer to often as the race of a person. Mm-hmm. And we've spent 30 years working together, and I'm trying to educate them. There is no such thing as race, but there's human variation, and they are fully on board, but they still want to know, were they to be seen in the streets of Wichita, Kansas?
Right.
Would they be looked upon as a black person or a white person or some other kind of person? Because regardless of the biological reality of things, that's how people look at other people out there. And so it helps with identification to try to frame a person that way. So there are other factors such as the manner in which they may have died. A coroner or a medical examiner will look at a body, they'll do an autopsy if it is more complete, and they will determine the manner of death.
Okay.
Or the cause of death.
Right.
Okay. I am not a medical examiner. I don't have a medical degree. I don't do things like that. However, I can look at gunshot wounds, I can look at cut marks, I can look at saw marks, I could look at fractures. This I have expertise in, so I can give opinions on or insights or documentation speaking to a manner of death. Did they die from a homicide? Did they die from a suicide? Did they die from an accident? But I cannot tell the specific cause of death.
I just think, like I said, it's so fascinating. Right now in Kansas, there are 25, I guess, human remains that have been found, and I don't know whatever the time frame was. It might be like the 70s or 50s and beyond. But I think it's so interesting because I know people like yourself have assisted with these cases, and there's just so many questions. Granted, I know probably a lot of people have done everything they can with them, but we're just hoping to bring people some sort of hope, and I don't know if we can, but sharing more of their stories and getting that out there, and maybe together everyone, because there's a big online community with,
Right.
looking into and it's fascinating. I mean, some of it I'm like, I think it's,
I think many of us, when I decided I wanted to get into this line of work, it was not because I thought I was going to save the world. But having worked in this line of work for so many years, I worked in Tennessee with my professors for about 6 years before I came here. So it's been 36 years that I've been doing this. And I have been testifying in a number of trials. It's not something we do a lot, but I still have been testifying in a number of trials. I've been working with a lot of people, not or hardly ever directly. But I do hear indirectly about families who find closure, and that does make it so much more, not worthwhile, but so much more, you feel comforted.
Yeah, there's a purpose.
That's right. And I think the contributions you're able to make, okay? At the same time, I get a sense that families, once we come up with a resolution, that could be an identification to a family member, sometimes they feel inclined to donate the skeleton, which means we as researchers, me as a teacher, we can expand the knowledge about all this. And that is something people are otherwise somewhat reluctant to, because who in their right mind wants to give up their relative? But there seems to be a connection drawn there, and I find that very valuable. So I very much appreciate all the people I have worked with, worked for, and I think it benefits us tremendously as a society.
You teach here at the school, and you have students who are trying to learn more of your craft or more along this line of work. How many students do you teach here that are trying to learn this type of?
Well, I think on the average, people who want specifically to learn how to do what I do, somewhere around 10 or 12.
Okay.
I have a range anywhere from 10 to 22 graduate students.
Okay.
And then I have a large number of undergraduate students who are interested in becoming graduate students. So my lab upstairs is full. The thing that you have to be very careful with when you involve students, you have to remember you are teaching them. You have to be careful where you take them and how they could impose on important matters.
Sure.
Like, you don't want a family to think that somehow a graduate student is trotting around
Right.
doing
No.
stuff. You want the family to know that whatever a student is doing is appropriate. And so we have very strict rules, we have very strict protocols, and so far I have, thanks to many of these families and all these experiences, I have a number of students who are professors at the universities. I have a number of students who work in coroner's office, medical examiner's offices, a number of students who are nurses, one who's about to go into nursing school. I have a number of students who are lawyers, medical doctors. Just those outcomes. For those people who are sitting counting beans and saying, well, we want to know what the outcome is of all of this stuff. It's not enough that we're just doing good for the world. I can give you numbers if that's what you want.
Well, I just think, it probably adds to the meaning to you, too. To
Oh,
know that
sure.
You're spreading that. And
Absolutely.
encouraging that. So.
Absolutely. But there are people out there who are sitting counting beans, and if we are not, quote unquote, producing a certain outcome, then we may not be considered valuable or worthwhile. And so I just am using the opportunity to say, well, there's plenty of outcome.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. One thing I think is great is that you say every couple of years you do like kind of out in the field you do like out what you say you did one, was it last spring you said?
Actually, it was last fall.
Okay.
Yeah, and we changed the rotation.
I was like, I don't know what you call that.
Right. Thanks to the Jackman family. I got to know David Jackman from Leon, Butler County.
Okay.
I got to know him. He was very interested in archaeology, and he heard me give talks about battlefield cemeteries and forensic anthropology, and he became very interested. And so he donated a large sum of money to us, or to me, or what. And he also donated land out in Butler County that we could set up experimental research. And so we work on how humans decompose. We work on what happens to gunshot wounds or cut marks or saw marks whenever they're exposed.
Sure.
We look at clothing, what happens to clothing over time. And so graduate students are doing their research projects out there. Meanwhile, I teach an introductory course, and then there's a human bone identification course, and then there's this forensic anthropology course where I take roughly 40 students out to the place. It's called Skeleton Acres.
Got it.
And students go out there, they have studied all semester, now go out there in teams, and their assignment is to recover a mock crime scene. Some of my second-year graduate students and I go out there and we set up these crime scenes. We dress these plastic skeletons up in clothing and then let them sit there for a few months, and then we go out there with the class and they recover it in Butler County and Setchett County and sometimes Greenwood County and others. They sent officers or detectives, and Butler County sends their big mobile laboratory.
Oh, really? That's
So
neat.
we have a real crime scene atmosphere out there, even though it's all made up. And I think last year the district attorney from Butler County was there, and so the students get to work and recover our crime scenes. We also have a unique facility here on campus, which is a 3D scanner.
Okay.
And so David Clam, a colleague I used to work with when he worked for the KBI, he now is the coordinator of a program here on campus in forensic science. He comes out with me, he instructs my students how to do the scanning, and then we do the scanning out there when they're recovering their crime scenes.
Okay.
And then we come back and they do their analysis and put their data together. They include their 3D scanning data. You see, when they come back, they bring in the bones in a body bag, and then once they're gone, a couple of my older grad students or second-year grad students and we will take the body bags, empty them, put real bones in the clothes, in the body bag. And so when they come in the following class period, it'll be the same body bag, the same clothes, the same everything, except it'll be real.
Wow.
See, we can't take the real skeletal
Right.
material and bury
would
it.
compromise it. It would
Yeah.
change it. So, no, I understand that.
So, but it does make the experience far more realistic.
That's fascinating. That's really intriguing.
And so they spent several weeks analyzing the remains and do basically what they've been taught to do throughout, these courses.
With you, you've been in this line of work for 36 years. Has technology changed things? I mean, you talk about the 3D there. I mean, has it changed and helped you a lot more?
Technology has changed and has been a great change, but there's something that doesn't seem to change, and that is experience. There's so much to be said for experience, and ultimately, unless you have experience and lots of it, unless you master the technology on top of that, you can come up with all kinds of new developments, and it may just fall flat. Years ago, I developed with my professor at Tennessee something called the Forensic Data Bank. It was basically calculating standards for North Americans, North American populations, and they were based on bone measurements from all over, a very large sample. And it has changed over the years, but the standards are more or less the same. But what has changed, I think, is that more and more people are becoming more and more, or have a stronger and stronger foundation. Okay, so really, actually, one of the things that came up in our last meetings in Baltimore, we have a American Academy of Forensic Sciences. One of the things that we were talking about was, technology is great, but the most success, the most consistent success, still seems to be if you have a well-trained, well-founded person.
Goes everywhere with any industry, for sure.
I think that's true. We're not at all, turning our backs on technology. Just the opposite. The question is, how do we implement it? We are working on technology here. I'm working with somebody over in bioengineering about how we can possibly enhance ways in which we age the individuals from the sutures of their skull. The sutures of the skull is where all the pieces of the skulls come together. And so those lines, when they fuse together, that is consistent with a certain time or an age. And so if we can be more precise as we do this, that will enhance, the specific nature of an age. So instead of saying somebody is 30 to 40 years of age, maybe we can get a little more detailed.
Yeah.
So
well, that would help, I would imagine, immensely, just the thing.
Well, with as many people as there are who are missing, sometimes you can argue you may not want to be too specific with an age. You want to fish more broadly.
Sure.
But on the other hand, if you have several people with specific ages and you have profiles that you established, a more detailed age can be useful, just like you suggest.
Yeah.
To come up with something.
Yeah.
It is more, it's very gratifying to me to know that I serve a purpose. I think I made that clear. As far as if there are things people should know, I'm really, the way I serve my purpose the best is to stay out of things, stay out of telling people what to do and things of that sort. I think through our teaching here, we make a real contribution. In the work that we do, we make a real contribution. But there are quote-unquote legal authorities who involve themselves with telling the community about what to do and what not to do and who gets involved in what and so on and so forth. Sure. And that is something that is totally outside the realm of what somebody like me can do. I'm basically a service to the community. In that sense, I'm an agent, I feel. but I play no part in the organization of how things are done and so on and so forth. My services are called upon. So,
That's okay.
and I think it serves. I mean, it works well in that way. And I'm telling you, a little side effect of all of this is every so often, just the other day, I had a Girl Scout troop come here, and they were wanting to know what people like me do and about the school and so on and so forth. And that happens several times throughout the year. I mean, that is a wonderful side effect as well. So people read about this in the papers and all that, but then they come here and they see that it's more than gore or horror, or
Sure.
they actually realize that there are real people associated with this, and you can sit down and you can actually talk about these horrible things and try to come to grips with them. And so, I think that in itself also is a nice side of what we do.
Well, you have to have those, I mean, it's hard to get through it otherwise, so.